keeping you up to speed on all your Colorado teams. It's time for Coffee Break.
Tough night for the Denver Nuggets. They lose their third game in a row for the first time in this NBA season. Patrick Surtain seems to be flirting with an idea that's most certainly inspired by another one of our Colorado stars on the gridiron. Adam Silver had some really interesting comments about what we may be in store for as NBA fans as it relates to the structure of the game. And finally, there's an idea coming out of Chicago that I think would be pretty cool to see pop up at our beloved ballpark at 20th and Blake. So I want to get into all of it. I am Richie Carni. Welcome into Coffee Break. And I want to start with the Nuggets because I found myself before tip-off when it was announced that Aaron Gordon would be free of his minutes restriction and would be back in the starting lineup at the expense of Christian Braun, who's been thrust into a starting role with the departure of KCP. And by my eyes and admission, as well as the admission of many others, I think it would be fair to say has stepped up admirably in that regard, going so far as to earn career marks and points in their game before last in New York City. So to have a career best as a first-year starter who has stepped up admirably in adjusting from becoming a bench rotational player, albeit a key one because he had some major moments during the championship run, especially in the NBA Finals, to now being a full-time NBA starter and doing it well. His reward, him and Christian Braun, is to now be benched at the first sign of a fully healthy Aaron Gordon, leaving a Russell Westbrook in the starting lineup. And the question I kept asking myself is, what more can Christian Braun do? You know, what more, if you are Michael Malone of the Nuggets, what more can Braun do for you? Okay. I don't quite get it. I think I get it, but I don't quite like it. Listen, I think it's fair to say that Aaron Gordon, with the caliber of player that he is, the role that he plays within the Denver Nuggets offense, and the commitment that he has shown since coming over here as part of the trade with the Orlando Magic that sent one of my personal favorite Nuggets, Gary Harris, out of town, Aaron Gordon deserves the opportunity to be a starter for the Denver Nuggets, let alone just in the NBA in general. And I think that the skill set that Aaron Gordon brings as one of the true remaining hard hat and lunch pail NBA players that I like to call him, a guy whose assignment can change on a quarter-to-quarter, night-to-night, week-to-week, or series-to-series basis, and he's fully able to mold and adapt to those changes, is important. But what Christian Braun has done in essentially single-handedly influencing the decision by Calvin Booth and company to not bring back Kentavious Caldwell-Pope is worthy of recognition as well. And I know that while the Nuggets have played well by and large and have performed well with Russell Westbrook in the starting lineup, we don't exactly know how that's going to hand out in the playoffs because there's been a difference in regular season Russ and playoff Russ with the previous 5 stints that he's had over the last 5 or 6 years. So with the knowledge that that's coming, Aaron Gordon is fully healthy to come up back off the bench, but he also said he was willing to continue doing that if it was best for the team. You can say that he may have been being a little bit, obviously humble and forthcoming, and I'm going to choose to take him at his word. And I know that you can only play 5 guys on the court, but I just don't know that that sends a great message to a young player like Christian Braun, who's done everything that he was asked to do at a satisfactory level or even higher than satisfactory level. And his reward for that is immediately being pushed down to the bench. Now, is that the reason why the Nuggets lost to the New York Knicks? No, just like it's not the reason why they're on their first 3-game skid of the season. They were uncharacteristically sloppy with the basketball. They had a lot of silly turnovers, even by Nikola Jokic, who by and large makes very few mistakes on a basketball court. And that led to a significant increase in transition baskets and a large disparity in transition points and points off of turnovers for the Knicks compared to the Nuggets. Nikola Jokic and Michael Porter Jr. also got into some pretty ugly foul trouble early on. You had a pretty tough whistle, honestly, going both ways in the first 7-8 minutes of the first quarter, but the Nuggets definitely found themselves on the wrong end of it when you had Nikola Jokic and MPJ pick up 2 quick fouls in the first half of the first quarter, and then you got to lean on Christian Braun and Julian Strawther to kind of pick up more extended minutes. And when you look at the minutes, that Christian Braun played coming off the bench. He played 29 minutes to Aaron Gordon's 30 in the starting lineup. So from a minutes perspective, you can say, hey, I mean, I guess it all came out in the wash at the end and, they were used in different moments at different times. I don't necessarily subscribe to that. I think that when you set and dedicate your starting five, that is an admission to yourselves and to the other team about how you're going to approach that game and the way that you're going to play it. So I do think it's a big deal that he was moved down to the bench. Is Aaron Gordon, by and large, going to be coming off the bench during the postseason? Absolutely not, in my estimation. I don't think that would happen. I don't know that that's necessarily the smartest thing to do. I think the Russell Westbrook experience and the success or failure of that once we get into the postseason, which I do believe the Nuggets will be kind of firmly right in the middle of that pack. I don't know that they have the gas to catch up to the Oklahoma City Thunder, but I also don't know, knock on wood, that they'll bottom out to the degree that they would be fighting for a play-in spot either. Not to say that it can't happen, because we've seen this Nuggets team go through some roller coaster slumps, but typically because of the talent that they have in Nikola Jokic and the propensity for the players around him to at least rise to the occasion on a game-to-game basis for short stretches of time, I don't foresee them falling to that steep of a precipice. So if Aaron Gordon's not going to come off the bench in the postseason and he's going to be part of your main five, that does relegate somebody like Christian Braun to the bench, or it could relegate Russell Westbrook. My point is, we don't have to figure that out quite yet. And what's been happening with Aaron Gordon coming off the bench due to a minutes restriction for kind of a nagging, reoccurring lower body injury that he's had to already come back and pull back again from in this season alone, it was working well. Christian Braun was playing well in the starting lineup. You were getting good minutes out of Russell Westbrook, by and large. He's still liable to have a pretty terrible night behind the three-point line and turn over, some high-energy passes and looks at times that you definitely don't want. But by and large, the Nuggets were performing well and had a pretty solid record with him in the starting lineup as the one and kind of allowing Jamal Murray to shoot and operate more freely at the two, which I think opens up a little bit more showcasing of his skill set, especially as a three-point shooter. And Aaron Gordon coming off the bench, you want to talk about a surefire way to survive the non-Jokic minutes? It's to have a starting caliber player like Aaron Gordon, who, yes, was dealing with a minutes restriction, but in theory didn't have to be for you to implement this strategy, coming off the bench. And you're already staggering Jamal Murray in those instances. So you're getting minutes from Jamal Murray and Aaron Gordon along the secondary unit. That's the best way I can think of to survive the non-Jokic minutes, which has been the pinnacle and the linchpin in the Nikola Jokic era of the Nuggets surviving or failing as a postseason contender. So I thought Christian Braun handled it about as well as you possibly could. He was interviewed after the game and had some interesting things to say as it relates to his benching. He said, and I quote, "Obviously, I took a lot of pride in having that spot, trying to win that spot, and I'm going to work to try to get it back. That's my job. But whether I'm coming off the bench or starting, I'm very grateful for every opportunity that I get." So, yeah, Christian Braun handled that about as classy and as humbly as you could expect, and that you would expect from a player like him who we've gotten to know over the last couple of seasons. He certainly could have handled it worse, like we saw Devondre Campbell for the San Francisco 49ers, who started a good portion of the entire NFL season in place of the injured Dre Greenlaw, who was a starter on the defensive front. And then as soon as Dre Greenlaw was ready to come back, not only did Devondre Campbell not play, he took his re-benching so poorly that he refused to go into the game in a critical situation that cost the 49ers a win. So, yes, while I think Christian Braun said everything that you would expect one to say in that situation, I'm not going to take it for granted that he is approaching that, because in this instance for Christian, this wasn't really a re-benching. He's been in the starting rotation all year long. He's essentially getting benched because they don't want to move Russell Westbrook out of the starting lineup yet, which they may or may not do when it comes to the postseason anyways. So I find this whole thing a little bit confusing. I don't know that I love the message that it sends in general, and that's a message that I think transcends sport to sport. I would say the same about it in football as I would in basketball or hockey or baseball or what have you. And I know each of those sports has its own different, unique dynamics. I just don't know that I love it. Okay. And we'll see if it has any longer standing ramifications or replications. But for now, I feel bad for Christian. I don't know that I would have asked him to do a whole lot more than he's doing, other than maybe being a little bit more efficient in terms of his volume shooting and converting that into points in some of those clutch situations. And he could probably rotate off of screens on the defensive side a little bit better. I think teams have kind of schemed up to get him in the spin cycle and screen him to death to create an open look. But again, this is somebody that we're talking about as a first-year player. Somebody who's not a first-year player that's taking some inspiration from a soon-to-be first-year player in the NFL is Patrick Surtain, taking inspiration from one Travis Hunter, who could go as high as number 1 overall in the draft if you read between the lines of the comments from the Tennessee Titans brass earlier this month. Travis Hunter famously, or infamously, if you're a fan of Boise State and Ashton Genty, played both sides of the football at a significantly high snap rate all season long for multiple seasons now. He made all conference on the offensive and defensive side of the ball. And that's opened up a lot of questions about whether or not he will continue along that path in the NFL. It's not something we see very often, if at all. And when we do see it, it's certainly not committing a starting role with significant volume on both sides. We've seen the likes of Champ Bailey and others play a wide receiver as well as cornerback. Heck, we saw Travis Hunter's coach, Deion Sanders, do it in place of an injured Michael Irvin for a short period of time. But the NFL is as strong and as fast as a collective group of players as it maybe has ever been. I think that's the case on a year-to-year basis. You're kind of chasing a sliding scale in that regard. And I just don't know that it's the smartest decision for Travis, nor the team that drafts him, be it the Tennessee Titans, the Cleveland Browns, the New England Patriots, the New York Giants, whatever team in that top 5, because I don't think he goes lower than 5 unless we get some crazy trades. Whatever team decides to take that investment in Travis Hunter, I don't know that it's the best decision for them, let alone the player himself. And you don't have to take my word for it. Take Champ Bailey's word for it. Earlier on a podcast with Dominique Foxworth, Champ Bailey himself, who again tried to do this at the NFL level after doing it a little bit in college, and certainly not to the degree that Travis Hunter has done it. He was asked that question about what would you do, Champ, if you were in Travis Hunter's shoes? And he said, I wouldn't play both ways. I wouldn't do it. Focus on what you think you're best at and become the best at it at this next level. Don't try to be, I think his exact quote was, don't try to be Justin Jefferson and Patrick Surtain. Just be one, because you're going to get exposed. And I think that's the reality, because as amazing as Travis Hunter is as an athlete, to the likes of which we have not really seen before in terms of production and may not see again for a very long time, as amazing as that is, this is the NFL, and it's easy to just write that off as a blanket statement, but it's not. In a similar way that every player in college was one of, if not the best players in the history of their high school, or certainly at their high school in that any given year, every player in the NFL is one of the best players to play for their college. It's the drop-off in talent and in size and speed and physicality from level to level is staggering, okay? And there's a lot of money on the line. These aren't kids anymore trying to build their brands and mold their futures. These are grown men, okay? And they're trying to win a Super Bowl. And so if I'm Travis Hunter, I don't need to do that. I don't need to play both ways, even if I want to, even if I think I could, even if I know I can, and I do it for a little while. I just don't think it's the right risk for Travis Hunter. Therefore, I don't want to see Patrick Surtain doing this as well. I think Patrick Surtain is a freakish athlete. I think that his coverage skills, his ability, his fluidity of movement, the way he's able to turn his hips and rotate on a dime to be able to have a closing speed on opposing wide receivers, who, again, in my opinion, get faster and more athletic every single year, is unprecedented. He's an all-pro and probable defensive player of the year who's still basically on a rookie contract. Okay. So he has not only taken the NFL level and run with it, he's running faster than almost everybody else on the race that he's on. And I think that that's special. Therefore, while it might be tempting, or while you might be able to sit with your buddies at a bar and say, hey, I think Patrick Surtain could be a better wide receiver than Lil Jordan Humphrey or Devon Vele right now, or whatever it is. I don't care. I don't want to risk a foundational cornerstone member of not just the Denver Broncos defense, but the Denver Broncos as a franchise, as they continue to build around Bo Nix under the tutelage of Sean Payton. I don't think the Broncos should or need to put a cornerstone defensive player of the year caliber of athlete on the chopping block for potential injury or risk, because I don't think the reward is that great. Did we see the Broncos run a Philly special and Bo Nix caught a touchdown pass earlier this year, earlier this season in Tampa Bay? Absolutely. Was it awesome? You're damn right it was. Okay. I thought so, but I don't want to see that all the time. Okay. So if you made me guess that, and if Bo Nix had gotten hurt on that play, oh boy, would I be singing a different tune? Same goes for Patrick Surtain. Could I see a situation where maybe in a blowout, they throw him out there as a decoy, or they run him a little jet sweep or things like that and want to get him in space? Sure. But for what? So that he can get a first down and another defensive player can just tee off on him and take a crack at him like he does to so many other players when he locks down basically the team's best offensive weapon on a game-to-game basis whenever he's covering them? Yeah, but what's the payoff? Again, it's not, it's not something that I think you would want to implement on any kind of regular, frequent basis, because that's why you draft players to do that. You sign players in free agency to do that job. You don't need this guy to play both, even if he wants to. As it relates to the NBA, on a broader scale, getting away from just the Nuggets, Adam Silver, who I think has been a very vocal commissioner in terms of our major sports leagues, and somebody who prides himself on being the most globally focused, although Roger Goodell and the NFL, I think, are really trying to edge into that space, and the most on the forefront when it comes to staying ahead of the curve, changing and evolving the game to keep up with both trends here locally, but also globally, and manufacturing a product that reflects those values. So Adam Silver was on the Dan Patrick Show this week, and he was asked about some of the craziest ideas that he and his board of governors have ever considered as it relates to changes to the game of basketball. And he laid out something that I just can't wrap my head around. He started off by saying, quote, "As we get more involved in global basketball, the NBA is the only league that plays 48 minutes, and I'm a fan of 10-minute 10-minute quarters. I'm not sure that many others are." You'll find me in that camp. I mean, putting aside what it means for records and things like that, I think that a 2-hour format for the game is more consistent with modern television habits. Okay, I'm going to park there for a second. So, for one, he is right. The NBA compared to men's and women's college basketball, compared to Olympic basketball, they all play 40 minutes. The NBA plays 48. Men's college has 2 20-minute halves. Women's college and Olympics has 4 10-minute quarters. Okay. I think that it's easy for someone in Adam Silver's shoes to sit there and point out buzzword type things that could benefit from a change like this. Oh, we're thinking about the consumer. We're thinking about the player. We're thinking about XYZ, the fan. No, you're not. No, you're not. My question to Adam Silver is, who do you think I am? You think I'm an idiot? The reason why you're doing this is because you know that TV ratings are plummeting, and you know that you need to make small tweaks and changes to try to appease that millions number to improve your bottom line and the general revenue for the league because of how much money the TV viewer is worth. But what this is a sneaky admission of trying to do that to cater to the television consumer while sticking it to the consumers of the people who actually dedicate more time, energy, effort, and money to view their product, and that's the people in the stands. And he basically says it. He says people in arenas aren't asking us to shorten the game. That was part of his anecdote back to Dan Patrick. People in arenas aren't asking us to shorten the game. But I think as a television product, and then he goes on to talk about how the Olympic basketball, international basketball, women's and men's college basketball. Well, there it is right there. As a television product. And in reality, what would we be talking about is we would be talking about reducing NBA games from about a 2.5 hour experience closer to like 2 hours to 2 hours and 15 minutes. That's not even like a 30 to 40% decrease, So how much time, again, are you really saving? This goes back to the juice and the squeeze argument, like I mentioned with Pat Surtain playing offense and defense. Yeah, you could do it. There's a path forward, and there's somewhat logic, if you want to drum it up behind it. But is the juice really worth the squeeze? And in this case with Adam Silver, it's not. Then there's the concept of, well, maybe it reduces load management, right? We get so frustrated when these NBA stars, the best players at their craft, not even to the level of we've seen with Joel Embiid or Kawhi Leonard over the years. But we see it with LeBron. We've seen it with Steph. We don't really see it that much with Jokic. But again, he's the anti-superstar. He's the opposite of every coin, that you normally see in the NBA. But we get so frustrated when our best players are not in the starting lineup, particularly when you pay money to go see a game. As a Lakers fan, you're paying to go see LeBron or Anthony Davis. As a Warriors fan, you want to see Steph Curry. And then you get to the game, and because of nothing that you can predict, he's not in the starting lineup, and you've spent all that money, dedicated all that time, and whether you brought your family, with friends, you went by yourself, whatever it is, you no longer get the experience you were paying for. It's the equivalent of buying buying tickets to a show on Broadway and not realizing until you get to your seat and you open up the playbill that you're actually viewing the understudy, not the lead role. I think that makes a little bit of a difference. So what about what are we saying to those people? How do they benefit from, 2 minutes shaved off of every quarter? They don't. So don't tell me that you're trying to think about the consumer and all that. And by the way, as somebody who will self-admit that they've gone down some significant wormholes when it relates to binge watching television shows, streaming things on the internet via Netflix or Peacock or Amazon Prime or YouTube, any of these other sources, I can tell you from my own personal experience, it's an attention span problem, but it's not an attention span problem as it relates to you. Because I've spent 6.5 hours binging the back half of a season of 1923 that I'll never get back. I've gone down wormholes in the late hours of the night and the wee hours of the morning watching adult cartoons on Cartoon Network or on Adult Swim, or going onto Netflix and watching Squid Games and getting it all done in a night because I just want to keep going and I don't want to wait for the cliffhanger of the next episode. So I've spent more than 2.5 hours watching things on the television. If I, as the consumer, or we as the collective consumer, are not watching your product, it has more to do with you than it does with our ability to dedicate 2.5 hours compared to 2 hours and 15 minutes. Okay. So in reality, what I think this is it is a way to basically charge the same and get the same while putting less up on the table. This isn't like a pitch clock situation in baseball, which I think is a fantastic rule addition to Major League Baseball. But you're not getting 7 innings of baseball in that case like you would be getting, if it was the equivalent of this NBA rule change. You're not getting less baseball. You're just getting the same amount of baseball in a more compact space, improving the pace of the game. And so it's almost the equivalent in basketball terms of going from a 35-second shot clock to a 24-second shot clock. You're not getting less basketball. You're just forcing things to happen and things to collide at a faster rate. That would be different. That's not what this is. And to the people who say, oh, with load management and things like that, I don't think that would change that much. I think the NBA players would still want to take their games off. I think the teams and coaches would still want to use this strategy that by and large they feel has been working for them. Who it would hurt? The bench players. I think you would get less bench minutes because there would be less minutes to go around. So instead of players playing, 30 or 31 minutes down from 37 or 38, I think they'd still be playing 35 or 36. And it's the secondary rotational players who would go from playing 12 to 15 to 8 to 11, and how does that help them at all? I think it doesn't solve the problem that you're looking for it to solve. The Colorado Rockies, though, they have a lot of problems, but one of them is not the ballpark, okay? Coors Field is the star in terms of the Major League Baseball presence here in the state of Colorado. The roof deck is great. The views, the sunsets that you get, there's nothing prettier than summer baseball in Colorado. And I am someone who's been fortunate enough to live right down there in that area in Lodo. And I, as a self-admitted part of the problem, partake in that as often as I can, despite the fact that I know the team's never really going to compete for anything serious, probably in my lifetime. But it's an enjoyable experience and one that I certainly don't pass up on if and when I have the time to do so. But I will say, as cool as the rooftop is, there's a new potential bad boy on the block as it relates to stadium additions. And this may exist in other ballparks around the country. I haven't been to every ballpark in the United States, something I'd like to do one day. But as of now, I have not. So I don't know if this exists elsewhere, but I did see it as a new feature being unveiled by the Chicago Cubs, who have unveiled what they're calling the Yard. New seating in center field, which features, hang on to this, high top seats. Okay, cool. Groups of 4 to 50 fans, pretty versatile. A ballpark meal included. Okay, we all know how expensive stadium food is. And then here's where I had to double check. Unlimited beer, wine, seltzers, and non-alcoholic drinks. I already take full advantage of embellishment in the rooftop when I can get in an hour before first pitch and take advantage of some pretty cheap cold pops up on the roof deck as long as I want and as frequently as I can get back in that revolving door of a line to do it. And I think that's fantastic. I think it's one of the best deals in baseball, frankly. And the atmosphere and the vibe up on the roof deck is amazing. But that is pretty cool too. And the Rockies already have kind of a weird seating situation out in right field on the field level line, but it's like covered. It's almost like you're sitting in another enclosed little dugout. And I've definitely seen people there in those seats. I've never done it myself, but just from viewing it, that doesn't have the same vibe as this. And I think you could build this exact same thing in Coors Field, and the only thing you'd maybe have to sacrifice is the water fountain and some of the foliage that surrounds out there, or you redesign and reimagine the rock pile and you turn that into a seating area where you can implement some of these things. I didn't think there was many ways to make Coors Field as a venue a lot better than what it already is, because I think the bones are pretty strong. But this seemed pretty fun to me. I'd love to know what you think. Feel free to chime it out in the comments, and I will be sure to get back to those at another time. But listen, man, I love the idea for the Rockies in Coors Field. If they don't do it, I'm not going to be bummed. As I said, I'm already a self-admitted part of the problem of why the Rockies will never be good, because I pay to go to see the games, even though I know the team's going to be bad. For basketball, I am typically traditionally on the forefront and a proponent of let's change things and stay ahead of the curve rather than falling behind. Speaking of baseball, I think that's where they've fallen short in a lot of ways, which is why the pitch clock has been such a monumental change on that front. This change, I don't like. And I didn't even have to bring up what it would do to, the records and the ability to score points and chase milestones and things of that nature, because while that would be impacted, I don't even think that's the biggest impact. We're already dealing with that in the NFL with the continued adding of a 17th game, soon to be an 18th game, and things of that nature. And that just is what it is. If Saquon Barkley had broken the rushing record over Eric Dickerson this year, I would not have been crying foul because he did it in 17 games instead of 16. And you can go into all the nuanced metrics of, well, he did it in more games but less carries and blah, blah, blah. If Cooper Kupp had broken the single season receiving record when he was winning the Triple Crown just a handful of years ago, I would not have cried foul. If Tyreek Hill had done it last year, I would not have cried foul. So all of that to say, that's not the crux of why I dislike this NBA argument. I just think that it's an unnecessary change. The juice isn't worth the squeeze. And frankly, I think it's a slap in the face to the consumers, to the good portion of consumers who come to watch the games in person, dedicating more energy, time, and money, even if you say that they're not worth as much as the eyeballs on TV, which they may not be. I'm not blind to economics. They still matter. And I think this is a slap in the face to those people specifically. And then as it relates to Travis Hunter and Patrick Surtain, you're already amazing. Just be amazing, okay? Just be amazing at one thing. You don't need to conquer the world, okay? You just need to rule your own kingdom, I guess, in a weird way of saying it. And for Christian Braun, I know I saw people in the comments chiming in about how, we don't owe Christian Braun anything, we being the Nuggets, and we need to get AG back in the starting lineup. I don't necessarily disagree with you, Danny, okay? I said there's not a world where Aaron Gordon comes off the bench, in my opinion, and in the world of reality, comes off the bench in the postseason. I get that. But what I'm saying is we better be careful how we approach this, because we don't know if we're going to say AG's coming back and Russell Westbrook is staying at the expense of Christian Braun. We've seen Christian Braun in a Denver Nuggets uniform perform well. He averaged 15 points a game in the NBA Finals. Okay. And the role that KCP played on that title team, the role that Christian Braun's now playing, that's an important role. Okay. Not that Russell Westbrook's isn't, but it's not. We brought Russell Westbrook in to be a bench player. We brought him in there to be a leader of the secondary unit in that rotation. So I don't think it's unfair if that's what Russell Westbrook has to go back to doing, if it means Christian Braun, who's playing well and just came off a career high in points, can continue to do so. Maybe it'll all work out. Maybe it all comes out in the wash and all of this is about nothing. Ryan says it doesn't matter who starts, it's about who finishes. That goes back to the argument of, well, like the guys played similar minutes, and we've seen them experiment with Russell Westbrook in closing minutes. We've seen them tamper with MPJ's presence in the final minutes of a game because of defensive limitations and things like that. So I get that notion. And listen, Aaron Gordon, one of the last remaining, in my opinion, the last bastions of the hard hat and lunch pail NBA player, as a defensive presence, I want him out there as often as we can. All I'm saying is I feel bad. I feel a little bad for Christian Braun. I do. I feel bad for a guy because when you're in a situation where you've done everything that's been asked of you and you've done it at an above satisfactory level, in my opinion, and maybe even in the opinions of Michael Malone, Calvin Booth, and company, I don't think that it sets a good precedent or it sends a good message to a young player for that. He didn't reflect any kind of animosity in his comments. He certainly didn't go the Devondre Campbell route and walk out on his team, nor would I ever expect him to do that. But I feel bad for him, and I don't know that he deserved that. And you can say, yes, it's a plus to come off of the bench because it would return to him being in that role that he was in on the title team where he was that spark plug off the bench. But you might need a different look. That look hasn't worked since the title year, and you might need a different energy. And maybe Russell Westbrook, because Christian Braun wasn't leading the point on that offense, Russell Westbrook could. And so, yes, the two-man game with Russell Westbrook and Nikola Jokic has looked pretty good. But I do think that you're not going to see all of this leeway and freeway with Russell Westbrook in the postseason like we're seeing now. So I guess maybe I'm just getting some mixed signals here about what it's going to look like. They've got time to figure it out. We'll go through the All-Star break. We'll see where they come up, where they match up in the seeding, who they match up against. And I think a lot of that, reacting in real time, will determine how they approach it. So as of now, this could be a whole much ado about nothing. But until then, I just wanted to be one to stand in front of a microphone and say, I think Christian Braun got done a little bit dirty. I don't love the message that it sends. I think Christian Braun is an adaptable player. I think that it's understandable that a player of Aaron Gordon's caliber is going to return to the starting lineup when he's able to, even if he himself said, and I'll take him at his word, that he would be willing to continue coming off the bench if that's what Michael Malone and co felt was best for the team. We'll see how it all shakes out. And if there's one thing I know for sure, it's that I'll be here to talk about it. I'll be here to converse with you about it, and we'll see you all tomorrow.